How could a man who spent decades playing America's most beloved father silently battle demons that nearly destroyed him? For generations, Robert Young was the face of calm. Whether as Jim Anderson in Father Knows Best or the wise Dr. Marcus Welby, he comforted millions of viewers with his warmth, stability, and quiet authority. But behind the perfect image was a man tormented by fear, depression, and isolation. He smiled for the cameras while hiding a secret so painful it almost took his life. In 1991, long after the applause faded, Robert attempted suicide. Few could believe it, least of all those who saw him as the very symbol of mental well-being. What happened to this gentle soul? And how did a life built on helping others end in such heartbreaking silence? If you believe in remembering those who gave everything to entertain and inspire, subscribe now for more stories that honor lives like his. Robert George Young was born on February 22, 1907, in Chicago, Illinois, to Thomas Young, an Irish immigrant father, and Margaret Fife, an American mother. The family moved frequently during his childhood: Seattle, Los Angeles, and eventually to Pasadena, California. These restless early years shaped a boy who often felt like an outsider, quiet and withdrawn in the noise of American life. In Los Angeles, he graduated from Abraham Lincoln High School and later studied acting at the Pasadena Playhouse, one of the most respected dramatic institutions of the time. But even then, Robert was not the obvious star. Reserved, painfully shy, and deeply introverted, he was the kind of young man who watched life more than performed in it. To support himself, he worked a series of odd jobs while playing small roles in silent films and community theater. It was during a touring stage production of The Ship that a talent scout from Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer noticed something in him. Something gentle, something quietly magnetic. He was signed to a film contract in 1931, and a career that would span over 6 decades had quietly begun. Robert Young entered Hollywood not with a bang, but with quiet endurance. His early roles in the 1930s were steady but unremarkable, supporting characters, secondary leads, often in films quickly forgotten. Studio head Louis B. Mayer once remarked, "He has no sex appeal." Yet what Robert lacked in flamboyance, he made up for in discipline. At MGM, he became known as a reliable, professional actor. Never the star, but always the support. For nearly a decade, he appeared in as many as 11 films a year. He worked with legendary co-stars Joan Crawford, Katharine Hepburn, Margaret Sullivan, Norma Shearer, but it was clear he was never Hollywood's golden boy. Many of his roles were the ones passed over by bigger names like Robert Montgomery. Still, he quietly left his mark in films like Northwest Passage, H.M. Pullham, Eskew, and Alfred Hitchcock's Secret Agent. But behind that tireless work ethic lay a growing storm. The very industry that gave him purpose also fed his deepest insecurities. Robert suffered from intense social anxiety and depression. The pressure to appear cheerful, composed, and successful became suffocating. He turned to alcohol, not for glamour, but to survive the spotlight. By the late 1940s, he had grown disillusioned with film. But instead of fading, Robert found a second life in a new medium, radio. In Father Knows Best, he played Jim Anderson, the gentle, dependable father America longed for. When the show moved to television in 1954, Robert became a national icon. And yet, the irony was sharp. While audiences embraced his image as the perfect father, Robert was drinking heavily, spiraling deeper into depression. For over 3 decades, he lived in silent conflict, admired by millions, yet unable to admire himself. By the late 1980s, Robert Young had become a rare presence on screen, making occasional television appearances while retreating from the industry that once defined him. The world still remembered him as Dr. Marcus Welby, the calm, compassionate physician who always knew what to do. But in real life, Robert was losing a different kind of battle, one not against scripts or ratings, but against his own mind. For over 45 years, he had lived with depression. It was a quiet suffering, masked by smiles, polite interviews, and the glow of celebrity. Behind closed doors, however, his world was shrinking. Alcohol had long been a crutch, and although he eventually overcame his addiction, the emotional scars remained. In his final years, Robert was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and developed serious heart complications. The man who had once helped millions face their struggles could no longer face his own. In January of 1991, at the age of 83, Robert attempted suicide. The news stunned the public. How could a man who had been the embodiment of stability, of kindness, want to end his own life? The truth was as sobering as it was heartbreaking. Robert had lived decades in emotional isolation. Burdened by chemical imbalances and internal pain he could no longer endure. And yet, there was light in those final years. With the help of his wife, Elizabeth, his partner of 61 years, Robert sought treatment. Together, they found a kind of peace through spiritual metaphysics and mental health advocacy. His final chapter was not glamorous, but it was brave. He used his own pain to bring attention to mental health, helping to establish support systems for others silently suffering. On July 21, 1998, Robert Young died of respiratory failure at his home in Westlake Village, California. He was 91, and though his passing was quiet, the ache of his absence still lingers. Robert Young left behind far more than just a long list of film and television credits. He left behind a legacy of quiet strength, a testament to resilience in the face of invisible wounds. Though never considered a Hollywood titan during his early film years, his later work reshaped the landscape of American television. Father Knows Best became a cultural touchstone, not merely because it entertained, but because it reassured. In a rapidly changing post-war America, Robert's portrayal of Jim Anderson gave audiences a sense of structure, decency, and love. Later, Marcus Welby, MD, redefined how television could portray medical care, not as cold science, but as deeply human compassion. His performances earned him several Emmy Awards, and in 1979, he was honored with a BAFTA for a documentary advocating motorcycle safety for teens, proof that even late in life, he used his voice to protect others. His influence extended beyond the screen. The Robert Young Community Mental Health Center, named in his honor, continues to serve thousands across Illinois and Iowa. In a city obsessed with glamour, Robert Young's legacy is different. He is remembered not for fame or flash, but for stability, for the idea that one could be kind, thoughtful, and quietly heroic. His life was not perfect, but his impact was deeply human. Robert Young once said, "I was an introvert in an extrovert profession, and perhaps that quiet truth explains everything. In a world that demanded constant performance, he offered sincerity. In an industry that thrived on illusion, he endured with honesty, even when it broke him." His story is a reminder that the brightest smiles can hide the deepest pain, that even those who comfort millions may themselves feel lost. Yet through it all, Robert never stopped trying to bring warmth into the lives of others, on screen and off. He gave us a version of fatherhood, of care, of steadiness, that still echoes across generations. In the end, he was not perfect, but he was real, and that is what makes his life worth remembering. If this tribute touched you, we invite you to subscribe. Not for fame, not for numbers, but to honor the lives of those who gave everything to illuminate ours. Let us remember Robert Young, not only as the doctor or the father, but as the man who quietly carried more than we ever knew.